Go ahead and hit record. Oh, recording is in progress, apparently. All right, so desktop number 2. Okay, so again, just thinking about our outline, I'm going to go ahead and open up Rhino, and I'm going to open up my demonstration file again. And I'm going to do several things here just to sort of make sure that I have everything all set for what I intend to do here. Project 1 demo, that looks good. Wait for that to open. Of course, I don't know why I waited so long to open Rhino. Here we go. And I'm actually, there's a lot of stuff in this file that I don't need for this demonstration. So I might just save this file down, a copy of it, and then delete everything I don't need here. Let me just look at this really quickly while I'm thinking about that. Yeah, I just sort of zoom in and out. Let's turn all these on, and you can see there's quite a bit of stuff here I don't really need for this demonstration. All of this. You know, I found that sound effects make things go a little easier. I can get rid of all these make 2D layers for the time being. They'll be regenerated later. Yeah, at this point, there's so many layers, it's just kind of confusing. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete all these other layers I'm not using. And I'm going to save as, and I'll call this Project 1 demo. I don't know what today's date is. Is it the 15th, 16th? 15th, probably. The Ides of June. All right. 15 June. Okay, that way I don't lose any of that other information if I need it later in the other file. But okay, so like I said, right, you can see there's a couple of, let me just blow this up bigger. You can see there's a couple places where these things intersect, and it's not actually drawing those edges for me. Okay, so one of the things I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to use the Intersect tool, right? For what it's worth, it's buried somewhere in this toolbar, right? This icon right here. If I click and hold, you see all these black arrows at the bottom of the icons. If you click and hold them, you'll see that there's not just one tool, but a set of tools, right? So these are all the tools where I can take a surface and generate curves from them, right? So I can find like an edge surface edge, surface edges. I can start to slice and dice these things serially. I can find where certain things intersect each other. I can project curves onto surfaces, etc. But I'm just going to go ahead and use the intersect. I'm just going to type in the intersect command. Intersect. Select the objects to intersect. So if you write down one thing from today, it'd probably be the command intersect. I'll be using that. I'm just going to select all of these at once. I'm going to hit enter. Okay. What's going to do is it's going to go through each surface or polysurface that I have, and it's going to compare it to every other sort of piece of geometry I have and see if there's any intersections. And if so, it's going to draw them, right? So where two lines intersect, that generates a point, right? Where a line intersects through a surface, that's also a point. But where two surfaces intersect, you get a curve. And if both surfaces are planar, like we have, then those curves are actual lines. They're going to be straight lines, okay? So it's generated a set of edge curves where all of these things sort of intersect each other, okay? And we're going to make sure that those are left on and that those will be drawn when we do our make 2D now. So again, all I did is type in the command intersect. I selected everything in my model here at once, hit enter, and it found all the intersections between all the different pieces of geometry. And so if you still have some curves, like some shapes and things like that drawn in your model, then you might see some points. You might see some little white points there. That's where, again, when a line intersects another line or curve intersects another curve, right, that happens at one point. And so that's why it's generating points on you. I just had a bunch of magenta curves. I'll just go ahead and say cell curve. You can see I'll select all the curves here on my model, right? You can see them highlighted magenta. Right. Let me go ahead and turn this to X-ray for the time being, just so we can sort of see, or no, maybe ghosted would be better, so we can sort of see through this. There we go. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and zoom extent. I'm just going to go ahead and center this back up so that it fills the screen. That's the magnifying glass with the 4 points around it, sort of finding the sort of bounding box of the entire geometry and then fitting our view inside the viewport. Okay. All right, so we just talked about intersect. Okay, that's a really important step to do when it comes to making these make2D things. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the make2D. I'll go ahead and type that in, make2D, just like we did before. I'm going to very carefully drag, and I'm going to make sure that I'm not actually dragging my cursor across the screen and into the edge and suddenly I change my view. Just want to make sure I'm selecting everything in this viewport. And look, this viewport right now, it's the one I've set to Axon. So Camry, I suspect that your active viewport when you did the make2D was not the Axon viewport. For whatever reason, this is named top, but clearly this is an Axon view. And so if you were looking at it from the top, let's say, then that could be an issue, right? Or if I accidentally drag this around and suddenly it looks like this, right? I just accidentally drag my cursor with my right mouse button, then there's gonna be a problem, right? Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and undo that, just escape out of there and not draw this because it's not a true 30-30 axon. I'm gonna go back to my isometric, go ahead and set that back again. Maybe I'll try this one, why not?
Yeah. Does it have to stay in like that perspective view the entire time?
Well, see, if I have 4 viewports up and I do
Mhm.
make2D and I select it, let's say here,
Mhm.
it's going to make a top view make2D, right?
Oh, okay. Because I noticed sometimes it switched to parallel instead of perspective, then it ended up
Yeah,
being.
so you want parallel, right? We're not drawing perspectives, we're drawing parallel paraline drawings, like axon
Okay,
drawings.
that's exactly where I
I'm
think.
not sure why this is calling itself top. I really don't know why. It's kind of buggy, I guess.
Got it. Okay,
Because I pretty clearly did this, but you want to make sure this is the active viewport.
got it.
And again, I'm not sure why it's calling it top. Like, let me just, now it's calling it bottom. Let's see what happens now when I, now it's calling it bottom, but whatever. I mean, at this point, but anyway, I'm going to go ahead and use the make2D. I'm going to go ahead and select this. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that's centered. Okay, it's selected, select the objects to draw. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Again, I'm going to double check these, make sure that the viewport's at the bottom, and there should be isometric or something, but the projection is set to view, tangent edges, hidden lines, scene silhouette, viewport rectangle. The viewport rectangle is going to draw a box around the viewport. For the next steps, that's going to be super important for us, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that that's clicked on. I'm going to hit OK. That's also going to give us a rectangle frame where that viewport was, okay? All right, now I'm not going to move my view at all for the next step. All right, so I'm looking at it exactly the same way as I did for my make2D. I'm going to go to my viewport label here, and I'm just going to click down where I had ghosted. I'm going to go ahead and select rendered. All right, let's just see what the default renderer settings look like in Rhino. So by default, right, it's going to have a certain lighting configuration. It's going to have a certain material configuration. It's going to have a certain environment set of settings, okay? So let's take a look at these one by one. First, when it comes to rendering these things, right, what we mean is that we simulate materials and lighting, right, and then we let this thing sort of iteratively solve sort of rendering of it to try to make it look a little more photorealistic. Okay, so in this case, by default, it's given a sort of white plaster, sort of a flat white plaster material to things, right? It's given us soft shadows, but not like a hard, crisp, direct sunlight for sharp shadows. So we just get these sort of tonal values, but we don't have like sharp shapes or shape shadows sort of cast on the ground and things like that. And we have this sort of ground plane that it's given us so that we actually projecting shadows onto the ground. And we see a horizon line here, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and change a few of these settings really quickly, all right? And I'm gonna go here to my right-hand side where I have materials, properties in layers, okay? I also have rendering properties as one of these boxes, okay? Has like a sort of blue rendered sphere as part of its icon, okay? If you don't see that, you can go to the render pull down and find render properties at the bottom of that pull down, okay? It'll bring it up here. It might bring up a box on the side, in which case you can drag it and dock it as a tab over here. Okay, first of all, it's going to say, okay, you're using the Rhino render. Yeah, okay, get it. It has something that we'll talk about here in a bit, like dimensions, right? I think by default, it's just going to render it the size of the viewport that I have set here on my screen. DPI is going to be 72. Quality is set to draft quality. I'll go ahead and leave it at draft quality for the time being. It's going to ask for something called the backdrop, right? So the background. Do I want to use a different solid color for the background, right? So I can pick any color. I don't know why you would want to do this, but I could, turn the background to red. Please don't do that. That is awful. I'll go ahead and set this back to white. You can even set it to just be a transparent background, right? When we render this out, then it'll just sort of look like a transparent background. And when we save it, we'll save it a special way. So I'm going to go ahead and use transparent background. Okay. Now you can see that this also has a ground plane setting and it's checked on. I'm going to turn that off. So I don't actually have a ground plane. I don't have that horizon line. By default, it's using some sort of custom environment called studio lighting. Okay, studio environment. And then down here in lighting, right, we'll see some similar settings, right? I have sun turned off. If I had sun turned on, then we'd start to get crisp shadows in different places. Okay, and we'd also get things brighter, right? So now if I turn my ground plane on and I turn my sun on, you can see that I'm very carefully ray tracing shadows on the ground plane. Right? And of course we could change the sun setting, so we could change our latitude, we could change the time of year and the time of day if we wanted to. Okay, I'm going to do it turn off sun. Remember, I turn off ground plane, transparent background is turned on. I'll leave the sort of default environment, turn off sun, leave skylight on, right? So this is like an overcast day where we still have light, but we're not getting crisp shadows because there's no direct sunlight. It's all being diffused by clouds and scattered and then reflected. Okay, I'll go ahead and use the default studio lighting environment. Okay. I'm going to make sure that these things like render curves and render surface edges and ISO curves are all still unchecked. Okay, and I'm just going to leave everything as default from there. Okay. All right. So as you can see, I can tweak these settings. And when I have my viewport set to rendered mode, I can sort of see those settings change in real time. Okay. Now, normally, based off of these settings, I could actually hit render and actually have it sort of go and take some time to actually render this out as a PNG or a JPEG I can take later. In this case, for our purposes, just this one time, I just wanted to get us acquainted with these settings a little bit. I'm just going to go to View, Capture to File. Okay. View, Capture to File. Okay, it was down here in the pull down menu. View pull down menu, Capture to File. Right, so there it is. I'm keeping my cursor there so you can sort of see where I got that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to capture the viewport. Okay, I'm going to say transparent background. It's going to bring up something. It's going to say, you want this? When I hit transparent background, suddenly that background, you can see it turns to a sort of checkerboard that talks about an alpha channel back there. It's going to say the resolution. You want to keep the same resolution as the viewport and the scale and stuff. I'm just going to leave that as default. I'm going to hit OK. Now it's going to say, where do you want to save this and what do you want to name the file? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this to my desktop in this case. I'm going to save file type as PNG. JPEG will flatten the image and won't preserve alpha channels. In other words, it won't preserve the transparent background. If we save out as a PNG file, it will preserve the transparent background. Okay, so I'm going to set it as a PNG file. I'm going to say Axon test 01 or something like that for me and hit OK. And I'm going to go ahead and, maybe I won't say that because I guess I already have that on my desktop somewhere. Also put June 15th here. All right, and hit save. All right. So now I have a PNG file that I can also, that looks just like this, that I can also use as a base underlay in my drawing if I want. All right. Again, I'm going to go ahead and save. Just get used to hitting Control S or Command S in your with your left hand on your keyboard. All right, now I'm going to go to top view and I'm going to take a look at this drawing that it generated for us, right? This Make 2D drawing. I want to look at this, double check some things for errors before I go ahead and export to Illustrator file, right? Export selected again. I don't know why this is taking a moment just to change views. It's kind of weird. Can't imagine looking at a really basic drawing in wireframe takes that much memory. All right, so you can see my model was way out here in the XYZ Cartesian coordinate space. Here again, it put this drawing, the bottom left of it, at the 0, 0, 0 point in my Cartesian space. So you can see, and then that's sort of positive X, positive Y quadrant. Okay, so that's the consistent pattern here. If you're looking at it going, why does it always like go off in the middle of nowhere? Or why is it always overlap with my model? It's because your model, it's always going to put this drawing at the 0, 0, 0 point. Okay, and so if you need to sort of select it and move it away from that model so it doesn't conflict with your geometry, you can. Or you can always just turn the model layer off so you don't even see that or accidentally select that. So you can just read the drawing. I'm just going to look at these layers one by one, right? So first we have the hidden curve layer. When I turn that off, suddenly we can start to see what I think should be our visible curve layers, right? So looks like we're still missing a couple. Looks like we're missing an edge there and there for some reason. I don't know why those got put in the hidden curve layers. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and set the visible curve layer, put the check mark there. And I'm going to go ahead and quickly just snap, draw a couple of lines there to fill that in. I'm just sort of going through the drawing and auditing it, like to sort of see, if there's anything missing here. Now you can see in the places where I had those intersections, right? They're actually drawn now, which is kind of a nice thing. These two things were flush. So if I want to actually make them look like they sort of, are this sort of part of the same sort of mass, right? I can go ahead and start to get rid of any redundant or superfluous lines, right? So edges, so this one, for instance, I'll get rid of. Looks like this one didn't extend all the way. I don't know why. Interesting. Sometimes it gets a little confused with the hidden line. So I'm going to go ahead and extend this. Okay. To extend, I'm just going to type in the word extend. And it's going to say select a boundary object or press enter for dynamic extend. So I'm going to just hit enter for dynamic extend. And it says select the curve to extend. So I'm going to select the curve at the edge around the side that I want to actually extend. You can see now when I click on that curve, it's going to let me extend it. And I can use my object snaps. I can say, okay, find that hypothetical intersection point. Snap right there. Okay, and that worked out pretty nice. So you can always go and practice these tools. We'll talk more about them later, extend, trim, split, etc. But I would just throw that out there. This is looking pretty good to me. It's not perfect, but for instance, I'm still on extend. Right, here's a case where I'd want to trim this away. So I'm going to go ahead and type in trim, not Tim, trim. I'm going to say select the cutting object. So I'll use this as the cutting object and hit enter. And then it says select the object to trim. So I'm going to select the part of the object that I want to trim away. There we go. And hit enter. I'm going to right click to repeat the last command. Select cutting objects. I'm going to use this as my cutting object in order to trim that away. There we go. That's better. Just do a little bit of cleanup here. All right. Yeah, I think that's looking better. Am I missing anything? I can't, I don't see anything that I might be missing. So I'll go ahead and leave that as is. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go to scene silhouettes curve viewport. I'm going to turn off all the other viewports for a moment. I'm going to look at the scene silhouette, right? So here's something that's really interesting, right? I'm going to have to clean this up. It didn't do a perfect job of sort of finding those silhouettes, okay? Because all of these are planar and straight, I might actually just do that in Illustrator here after the fact. But I just thought I would bring that to your attention, right? So the scene silhouette really should like go around and form that sort of silhouette around this whole shape, right? And you can see that there's some gaps in there for some reason. It might do better once the, you know, if we weren't doing the hidden lines. I don't know why the hidden lines sort of seem to confuse things and starts to put things on hidden line layer that maybe shouldn't be on the hidden line layer, but we'll take a look at this. And again, it's all about auditing, right? This process is all about sort of being really careful, right? So I'm going to go ahead at this point, just sort of save. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and do the export selected. Okay, go ahead and select this stuff. Export selected, file pull down, export selected. I don't know why Windows is acting so weird. Maybe it's downloading some updates again. All right, and I'll call this Axon 15 June demo or something like that. Again, it's gonna, I gotta tell it to do an Illustrator file, .ai file. All right, go ahead and hit save. And now again, I want to say preserve model scale and export this out at the 1/8 inch scale, right? So every inch in the drawing will equal 8 feet, every 1/8 inch in the drawing will equal 1 foot. And I go ahead and hit OK. I can save and close Rhino, hopefully. I'll leave Windows up for time being, just in case. All right. This was the demo I had up the other day. I'm going to go ahead and close that. I'm just going to open up the file that I just generated here. So import. So file open, and I'm going to go to the desktop where I saved mine, Axon 15 June demo. All right, there it is. All right, just a little bit of review of Illustrator. I'm just hitting Command minus or Command dash or Control dash for the U on Windows to zoom out a little bit. Let me go to Document Setup. All right, it's going to bring up a box where I can say Edit Artboards, and now I can change the paper size. Right. So what paper size did we say we're going to use? I can't remember.
18 by 18.
18 by 18. All right. I don't know what happened there. Let's see. Try to type a little better this time. Okie dokie. All right. Now, again, I'm going to make sure it's preserved the layers that actually had stuff on it: the viewport rectangle, the visible curves, and the scene select curves. For whatever reason, I had the hidden lines turned off. Oopsie. But that's all right. I'll go ahead and leave those off for now. I'm going to go ahead and drag and select all of these together and just move them to sort of try to center them up a bit here. Okay. My screen. Okay. Now let's see what else. Right. So let's see, drawings, layers, line weights. All right. So let's look at the layers really quickly. We have a viewport rectangle layer. I'm sure you're familiar with these now. The visible curves layer, scene silhouettes layer. You probably had hidden line layers and things like that the last time. I'm going to go down to the bottom of the layers box, and you'll see that there's a box with a plus on it. When I hold my cursor over, it says create new layer. I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer. In this case, it's just called a layer 4. I'm going to click and drag it down to the bottom. And I'm going to double click on that name, the label for it. Instead of layer 4, I'm going to call it rendering underlay or something like that, just so I understand what this is later. Rendering underlay. I'm going to click this, try to make this the active layer, right? All right, now I'm going to go ahead and import or place the rendering, the PNG that we made, okay? And I'm going to put it on this layer. That way we can composite these things together. So there's a couple of steps here. We go to File and Place, and that's how we can place graphics like JPEGs and PNGs and other sort of photos and images into our Illustrator file. So I'm going to go to File, pull down, Place, and it's going to ask me, oh, what are you going to do? And I'm going to find the desktop. There we go. There's the rendering Axon test 01 June 15th.png. And I'm going to click somewhere here to put it in. All right, you can see it under here. All right. And it's on its own layer. Now, there's something really cool, clever that I want to do here. Well, I don't know if it's cool, but it's clever. And it's about, you know, sort of being really precise and careful. This viewport rectangle, right, should be the exact same size as this rendering. If they aren't, then I can click on this rectangle without moving it, and I can see its width down to 4 decimal places of inches, its height, and also its position in the X and Y plane, XY plane in Illustrator. And so using those exact same values, I can make sure that this is the exact same size, width and height, and is in the exact same location, right? So that it matches up perfectly with the line work, right? So this is an underlay for our line work. And so I just want to make sure these things match up really precisely. So here we have 20.2839. I'll go ahead and copy that so I can select this, and it's close, but it's not perfect. So I'm gonna go ahead and paste that new value in, right? Okay, and you can see that it just barely changed its size a bit, but now it'll be perfect. 10.3428. This is also 10.3428 now, because they should have the same aspect ratio. Okay. Now I'm going to look at the X coordinate for this top left corner, right? I'm going to select this box and look at, it's at negative 1.2702 inches. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go ahead and select my image and paste in the same X coordinate. So now it's going to slide over an X and line up perfectly in X. Now I'm going to select this viewport rectangle and get the Y coordinate, copy. I'm going to do the exact same thing here with the scene silhouette, paste that Y coordinate. Okay, so what I'm doing is just being very precise and making sure that this thing is the exact same size and lines up perfectly with the line drawing, right? All right. And I select that, it's under the rendering underlay. Now you can see that it's a lot easier, I think, to read this drawing, isn't it? Right. So you can automatically sort of see and go, oh, okay, now I think it's a lot easier to sort of tell what we've done and where the planes are and what's further back, what's closer to me, right? It really sort of helps these things pop. And, you know, honestly, I could select this image, right? I'm just selecting just the PNG. There's other settings up here. So in addition to size and location, right, there's also one called opacity. I could also turn this down to lighten it up. Let's say I just want some very subtle tone and shade, right? I could turn the opacity down so I just barely see it, or I could leave it up to 100%, and right. But I could always tone this down, soften it up a bit, right? In other words, I want to make sure I see the line work. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at the line weights now. Okay, a couple of things. I have the layers open. I don't want to accidentally. I've gone to painstaking lengths to place this image precisely, right? And to make sure that it's the exact same size. I'm just going to go ahead and lock that layer. So right next to the eyeball, right? I can turn this layer off and not see it, but I can leave it on and just lock it so I don't accidentally select it or move it or anything, right? I can't edit anything on that layer. And therefore, I can still see that rendering, but it's going to help me out. But I can't accidentally screw something up. And I'm going to turn off the viewport rectangle. I can just turn that off, turn the eyeball off. It's there still. I can turn it back on. I just don't even want to see it. It's not part of the drawing. That was just a frame to help everything line up and align carefully. And I can look at the visible curves, right? And I can look at the scene silhouettes. Now, if I'm looking at the scene silhouettes, there's some that are here that aren't really part of the silhouette, right? So I'm going to have to make a couple of decisions here that are going to be kind of painful, I think, actually. But if I take a look at this stuff, it's actually stunning how bad the scene silhouette feature worked. Usually it does a pretty good job with these. I'm just going to select all of these at once, both the visible curves and the scene silhouettes. I'm just going to turn them to the same line weight for a moment. I'm just going to put 0.75 maybe, right? I'm turn them down a bit. Let's see. Are they all 0.75? Are they all black? So in this case, when I select them all, again, I'm throwing something new at you, right? I was assuming that they were all black or gray. I'm just going to go ahead and double check that, right? So when I select something like a shape, right, I can change both the inside, the fill color, and also the outside or the sort of outline stroke color. So depending on which one of these is in the foreground, I can click back and forth, right? So in this case, I'm just going to make sure I have the stroke color. And I'm just going to go to my color palette and double check and make sure those are set to black. Okay. So here we have both of them. Say, I'm going to hold down the shift key and select all of them at one time. Make sure that they're set to maybe try 0.5. It's not so bad. Yeah. All right. Now a couple of other things, right? In this case, what I did is I made the decision that since my scene silhouette was such a mess, I'm just going to redraw a new scene silhouette here in Illustrator. So let me show you how you can do that. I'm going to go ahead and create a new. I'll go ahead and lock these. Then we'll go ahead and create a new layer. I'm going to call this the scene. I'll just name this scene silhouette. Silhouette's one of those funny words that's kind of hard to spell unless you do it a lot. Okay, and I'll go ahead and make that the active layer. And I'm going to go ahead to the line tool over here. I'm going to zoom in. I'm just going to go around and make a set of lines on this new layer. And once I make that first one, I'm going to go ahead and change the line weight to, let's say, 1. Okay, so that's a little beefier. And I'm going to go ahead and go around this thing and just do this myself. It's a small price to pay. It's still only going to take a few minutes, right? So just, okay. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm just making sure that I'm going around. And again, Illustrator by default has this sort of smart tracking where it helps you sort of snap, right? So if you zoom in, you can sort of see, make sure that you're actually drawing a new set of one thicker sort of, lines over top of the other lines, making sure that they all line up at the same place. You don't always have to do this. In fact, it's kind of a pain to have to do this, but attention to detail is always a good thing. So I'm just clicking and dragging in order to draw a new set of lines. Now I can see I actually missed a couple of things here. Interesting. Might have to clean that up here in a bit. Oops. If you accidentally click somewhere, you just hit cancel and then it'll. Let's see. Yeah, so this one I'm just going to bring in to there. And I'm just going to draw a new one down. There we are. Huh, it's weird that it messed up that way. In fact, I thought I'd actually fix that. But... Okay, so here, I'm just going to quickly go around and try to be a little careful here. And again, making sure that as I draw them, that I make sure that they're all, let's say, 1 point in line weight, that a thicker line weight. Again, I hope you don't always have to do this, but in this case, it was just such a mess. It's easier just to sort of go around. And since these are all straight lines, it's not too hard to just sort of click and drag and draw some lines and snap around to here in Illustrator even. Just going around here. Oops, see, I was off there. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. If I have to zoom in a little closer, make sure I'm snapping to exactly the right point there. Yeah. It'll help you snap. All right, almost there now, kind of. About halfway there. I'll try to speed things up. The price we pay for beautiful drawings. Again, I'm going to the places where there's actual silhouette, right? So all the edges where there's air. So this one included, right? Let me just make sure I snap. There we go. Just going around. There and there. There. Okay, I think we're back. There might be a few other places where we need to add a couple here. It looks like there's one right here. Oh, that's annoying. Let me zoom in on that so we can see it a little better. There we go. One right here. Again, attention to detail. I'm almost there. There's always something to do with these. All right, there's that one. There's one over here as well. I might have them all. All right. So that's how to make these things pop a little more. All right. Go ahead and hit save. And it's going to say, are you sure? Do you want to save as? Because you're going to save this as like a Illustrator 2021 version file. I'm just going to hit yes, just save over, replace. And I'll just use the OK, the default here. Okay. That's looking pretty nice, if I do say so myself. All right. Last but not least, let's talk about these silhouettes. Let's see here. So if you go to the page called Silhouette Scaled Figures, it's in, again, if you go to the module, always just go to the modules, right? We're still in module 1, and we're looking at modeling planar compositions. Now we're still there. Silhouette Scaled Figures, right? You'll see there's a variety of scale figure Illustrator files here. I'll go ahead and start opening some of these in Illustrator here. So again, I'm just going to open up some Illustrator files. Let's take a look at these one by one. File open, and let's see, downloads. Here we go. I'll just open all of these at once. These are for you. They're just stuff I found online, right? They're already vectorized, which is nice. Right? So depending on, showing people doing things or groups of people doing things, these are come in really handy to sort of show scale. All right. Let's go with a couple of groups of people, maybe. All right, so a couple of things I might do here is quickly, let's see here. The groups of people, let's see, people. I'll just quickly you don't need a surfer. It's bizarre. All right, I'll just quickly grab this bunch of folks here. I'm just gonna select them and hit copy, like Control C. Let me go to my my Axon file. I'm going to hit Control V or paste here in a minute. But first, I'm going to give these a layer to be used on here. So I'm going to hit plus. I'm going to say, go to my layers box, hit the plus to add a new layer. Select this. I'm going to say scaled figures. Okay. And I can lock everything else for the time being, so I don't accidentally screw anything up here. And now I'll paste these in. Right, first things first, let's talk about scale, right? So we said that this was going to be 8 scale. So every inch is equal to 8 feet, right? And so if we take, let's say this is an average person somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 feet, okay? Then what we're going to do is we're going to scale these folks accordingly. Let's see here. If I think about this for a moment, what that means is every 1/8 of an inch is 1 foot. So let's say 5 feet would be 5/8 of an inch tall. 6 feet would be 3/4 of an inch tall. So let me just sort of look at this. I'm going to select one of these and just sort of see what the height is. It's 0.7931. It's a little too small, maybe, or a little too big. I mean, it's kind of it's bordering on pretty tall there. I'm just going to scale these down a little bit. Select them all at once. Hold down my Shift key, right, and click and drag that handle in the corner to scale. Right? If I don't hold on my Shift key, I can accidentally stretch things. But if I hold down my Shift key, it'll keep the aspect ratio exactly the same. So on my keyboard, holding on the Shift key and then clicking and dragging, right? Let's just take a look at this now. 0.6632. Let's see, what did I say? 5/8. That's let's see, what's 5/8? 0.0. Gosh, I can't even think of simple things now. What a day. 5 divided by 8. 0.625, right? So this person is somewhere between 5 and 6 feet. That looks pretty good to me, I think. Let's see. Maybe scale up just a little bit more, right? Yeah, there we go. I'm pretty comfortable with that. All right, now we have a bunch of silhouettes that we can use. Okay. You can see that when I copied and pasted these, they were all in the different layers. They're on their own layers. If I select them again, let's say I want to put them all on one layer, right? So when I select them, you can see all the things that are selected show up here in boxes in the respective layers. I can click and drag this layer or these boxes into the scaled figures layer. What it's doing is it's setting each of these things that were in these layers now into the scaled figures layer. It's kind of a weird thing here, but rather than having to go to a properties menu somewhere else, I can just sort of drag and drop these things. Now I don't have, I don't have anything in these layers that I have, right? So I can just sort of delete those away. Okay, so now they're all in the scaled figures. Now I can position these around however I want. Okay, so I might put some folks down here on the ground plane. This looks like someone up here. Again, remember, this is an Axon, so this is not perspective. So everybody's going to be the exact same height, regardless of where they're at here in the scene. Maybe I'll put somebody here, standing right there. Not a few folks. Maybe it looks like this person's actually walking through there. That doesn't look so bad. Don't be afraid of overlaps if you have somebody down here. Almost like just a kid sort of running around over here as well. You can sort of there, that's so bad. Right? Now I can sort of give some scale to these things, and particularly in trying to, or at least where it looks appropriate, where you can start to populate and activate some of these volumes and planes that you have in here, right? So you can start to begin to suggest use or scale and start to understand maybe what you have spatially here on the inside. Okay, they're not all just going to be on the ground plane. That'd be really boring. Maybe that's a function of the view I picked, but it'd be hard to put somebody in here. But I was able to put somebody up here at least. Some folks up there. All right. Here are a couple of people. You could always have some folks off here in the distance. Now, the problem here is that they would need to be back behind this. So what I would do in this case, I would select them. I'd make a new layer and place it all the way at the bottom. I'd call this background silhouette or something like that. And then just select these and bring them down there. And now they're going to be behind this thing here. Oh, actually, look at that. Not quite even, because I set the background, the rendering underlay to somewhat transparent, didn't I? Now I'll just move that out. But you can see the idea here. Right? You can start to add a little bit of depth and layering here. And tomorrow, like I said, I'll have a silhouette pack of trees and vegetation for you guys to, you can start to populate the ground plane around the edges as well. Okay. Then we can start to understand scale, right? And we can understand that, even if there's indoor space here, there's outdoor space here, right? So, you don't always necessarily need a wall or a gate or something like that in order to define outdoor spaces, right? Outdoor rooms, right? You can do that with vegetation, with a well-placed tree, with a canopy overhead, or with just changing the ground plane materials and things like that. So again, this is just to sort of take this one step further, right? And so what I've asked for you to do is try this workflow that I just demonstrated and recorded between now and tomorrow morning with one of your models, your favorite model, okay? Using the silhouettes pack, some of the silhouettes from the silhouette packs that I gave you. Try the rendering. Try being really careful about the line weight, okay? And in intersections and sort of auditing the drawing, making sure that everything sort of works, right? If I look through this, maybe the line work's really kind of too light. So I go back to the visible curves, right? And I select those. Instead of 0.5, maybe I put 0.75 or something, right? Okay, or whatever. And look, I went around and started making my own. There were one point. Let's say I want to make sure that those, maybe they weren't necessarily all on the right layer, right? I can always select, let's say, one of my 1 points, like my thicker curves, and then go to select pull down and say select all of the curves that have the same stroke weight, right? The same line weight. And then make sure that I put those on the scene silhouette layer. I'll unlock here. There we go. Yeah. All right, now I can take these and change it maybe to 0.75, make them just a little darker, right? So, maybe now the scene silhouette curves aren't dark enough or thick enough. So maybe I give them just a little more. If I want something between the 1 and the 2 here, I can type in a value. So I can say 1.5, for instance, and beef them up somewhere in between 1 and 2. Okay. Similarly, just with like we did with the PNG, if I take all of my silhouettes, my scaled figures, I can always turn down their opacity as well, right? So let's say they really stick out as being like way too dark and contrasty. Or I want us to be able to see some of the spatial characteristics behind them. I can always turn them down in opacity. Okay. Right, or leave them completely opaque. So I want you guys to try this with one of your models between now and tomorrow morning. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Let's take a look at the chat and any questions you guys might have here. Let me stop sharing.